Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning to those that are following us through the internet, keeping yourself warm at home instead of us who left in this summer cold day that feels more like winter. Hopefully it's going to warm up again during the week, but it's nice to have you all here today. And we're going to have a lecture about the divine or natural law. But as always, before we start our lecture, we're going to have our initial prayer and our initial reading that Juliana is going to help us with. And then we're going to have Rafael giving us the lecture today.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm going to read a message from Happy Life, from Divaldo Franco and Joanna de Angelis. So a device is only valuable if you are willing to act on it. When you are in any type of difficulty, ask a more experienced, better equipped person for help and advice. But do not try to prove your own opinion correct. Listen with care, think, and then take the decision that seems most suitable. On the other hand, do not disclaim the orientation and advice that you get or are looking for either. Examine everything and keep what is good, thought the apostle in the name of the God. Let's close our eyes. Let's connect our hearts and our soul with our Master Jesus. And at this moment, we think about all the new teachings and the learning that we can experience in this place. Let's be thankful for the opportunity to be here together. So once more, we can learn and we can improve ourselves and we can keep working on our inner selves. We ask you, Master, to bless our friend today, Rafael, who will be giving us the lecture, so we can also learn through that and understand a little bit more of what happens in this world. Thank you so much and be with us. So be it. Rafael.
Hi everybody, good morning.
Good morning.
I was sitting there and was thinking how wonderful it is that we are so different from each other and we can all come here and bring different sides of this special doctrine. And I thought about that when Teresa said that she is kind of sad that today is cold. I'm very happy. I love cold. I start getting sad when it gets too hot outside. So that's the best time of the year for me, when this fall starts and then we have winter, then we have snow, I have Christmas. It's the best for me. So the idea today is to talk about the divine or natural law. It's a very important chapter of the Spiritist book, and it's in the first chapter of the third part of the Spiritist book. And I'm going to develop the subject according to Kardec, according to the teachings of the Spirit of Truth, this phalange of spirits that we refer to collectively as the Spirit of Truth. Of course, we always have our own interpretation. So I'm going to be giving here what I've studied, and there's always my own sauce on whatever I say. This happens to every speaker. So that's why it's important to have a different collectivity of speakers so that you guys can form your own opinions and you guys can form your own knowledge about the Spiritist doctrine. And of course, reading the chapter is also important so that you guys can read from the source itself. So I would like to start by talking a little bit about what is a law. So it's a cliche. We always start, I'm not going to say that I look in the dictionary and give the definition of law. But it's an important cliche because we start by defining the word that I'm going to be using over and over and over again, and it's so important for the understanding of this presentation. When we think about law, so I'm going to talk about the divine law. So when we say law, immediately there are two things that comes to mind. One of them is law of society, so laws that we have to follow. Since the Roman Empire, we have this, we inherit this culture of having a penal code. So we all have to follow that. And if you don't follow, you're going to be penalized. That's how we can organize a society. That's how we can have, how many? 3 million people living in the same city, because we all have to follow rules. And if we don't follow those rules, there is a penalty for that, according to the infraction that we have committed. But there's a second aspect too that we think, which is a physical law, a law of nature. Everything is law of nature and everything is law of God. But in one side we think about internal laws, so moral laws, that tells us how to relate to ourselves, how we relate to God, and how we interact between ourselves. So it's something more interior. We look inside of us. And there's the exterior part, which is a physical law. That is also a law. And in those both cases, once we develop a law as a society, or we discover a law in science, it is independent of opinion. It doesn't matter if you agree or not. It doesn't matter. You have to follow. That is a very important aspect of using the word law. You have to follow. So, if I go, I live very close to Yorkdale Mall. It's a very nice mall, and in that mall there's a Tesla store. So you go there and they have the Tesla, the models, the car. And I work with electric vehicles, but I cannot afford one. So I go there and I look at that and I enter and say, wow, I would like to drive this car, but I can't afford it. I cannot just take the car and drive out of there and running over people in the Yorkdale Mall. I'll be penalized. There's a law. It doesn't matter if I don't agree, if I want the car, it doesn't matter. It's a law. I have to follow. In the same way, a physical law, for example, law of gravity. I can say that I don't agree with the law of gravity. If I jump out of a building, I'm going to fall and I'm going to hurt myself. It doesn't matter. I can say, even after centuries of study of geometry, I can say the earth is flat. The earth is round. It's not our opinion. It doesn't matter. I can take, so I think this is very funny. So a person says, oh, the earth is flat, or I don't believe in general relativity or special relativity. Then the person takes the cell phone and looks on the GPS. Oh, there I am. The GPS doesn't work if the earth is not round, if general relativity or special relativity is wrong. The satellite will complete this orbit independent if we believe or know about those laws. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you use the GPS, you are using all those laws. They have to converge in order to give you your position in the globe. So it's independent. Once we discover, we have to follow. But then you can tell me, yeah, but laws change. They all change, of course. They change. But they change because we still haven't converged completely to the divine law. We are learning. This week, it's interesting how once we know that we're going to do a presentation here and we start studying for it, things start happening in your week, in the days before the presentation, that prepare you for the presentation, even if you haven't planned for it. So I was in the job, in my work, and I'm always talking about Spiritism. I don't care if people don't know or if they don't agree. So then we were talking about the development of the world, the evolution of our world as a society. And then my colleague said, yeah, I don't see this happening. I don't really see our world developing. And then, of course, I was studying for this presentation, and I gave him 2 examples. That it is independent of opinion. It shows that we are improving. What are those 2 examples? One of them, I don't know if you guys know, in the book the Deuteronomy, one of the 5 books that are that we think that Moses wrote. So the last one is the Deuteronomy. And in the Deuteronomy, there's a lot of laws that the Jewish people had to follow. Not the Jewish people, the people of Israel. Jewish people is just one tribe, so all of them, people of Israel. And it says this. So if you live in the same house of your brother, and your brother is married. So imagine, so you have a house, and 2 brothers live in the same house, and one of them is married. If the brother who is married is killed in a battle, or whatever happened, so that the guy died, he discarnated, the other brother has to marry the wife of the dead brother. He has to. It's the law. If you don't do that, it's the penalty starts with public humiliation. It starts there. Then he either is killed or stoned to death or loses a limb. So there's no much choice. You have to marry. You have to marry the wife of your dead brother. So that was a law at that time, around 2,500 years ago. Then we can say, yeah, we evolved, we changed from that time. But that was a long time ago. We haven't changed that much. Then there's another example. During the Second World War, the Germans, they communicated through a very advanced machine for the time called Enigma machine. So Enigma had millions of possibilities to encrypt a message. So then you have a person that would stay in the base, the command base, and that there would be a setup for the machine. So then the guy that would go in the submarine, the U-boat, would have another machine with the same setup. So then they would send a message, encrypt message, and the person on the other side will be able to read because they had the same setup in the machine. So English intelligence hired, or they put together a team of mathematicians to try to break this code, because then they would be able to foresee where the attacks would happen. So at that time we had several ships, of Allied ships, being sunk by U-boats. So they really needed that. And the guy who developed the machine, a computer, we didn't have computer at that time. So there was one guy that developed a computer to decode those messages. His name was Alan Turing. Now we have Turing machines. So at that time, his papers were already referring to artificial intelligence before there was computers, 100 years ago. So his mind was right here with us, even though he was living 100 years ago. But he was homosexual. Because he was homosexual, he lost all his grants. He was condemned by a law from 1885. So he became a criminal because he was homosexual. And this whole trial happened after the Second World War. So we are talking about between 45 and 50s, not too long ago. And he had to take several very strong hormones in order to decrease his libido, so that he wouldn't look for other men. So they were trying to attenuate or make him get rid of his sexuality. And eventually he killed himself. He couldn't take it. So he injected poison in an apple and he ate the apple. And he was a brilliant scientist. My point is, what if that happened today? We wouldn't have him as a criminal. It would be just another person. It doesn't, whatever his sexuality is not something that is not our business. It's not anybody's business. So we are changing. We are evolving. You just need to look. The same thing as temperature. The global temperature, you look at the average. You don't look at the instantaneous sample. You look at the average. So the average of our world is getting better. But this is also a point that shows us that the law changes. The law keeps changing because we are searching for this divine law that I'm going to talk about, and it is written in us. We have it in our hearts and in our mind. That's another very important point. We cannot understand our hearts if you don't work our minds. If you don't develop your intelligence to understand yourself, you won't be able to change because you cannot recognize the error that you are committing. So that's something that we learn from the Spirit's book. And every single spirit that comes, they say that we have to study. Why do we have to study so much in Spiritism? Because we need to understand ourselves. We don't even know that we are committing a mistake, and sometimes we understand that we are making a mistake because we are suffering, but we don't know why. And after we study and we learn how to interpret our own actions through our own work, then we can start the change. So that's why spiritual evolution is moral and intellectual. It has to go together. So, I talked about moral laws and laws of society, but we also have science laws, or scientific laws, physical laws. They change too. How? Between the 17th and 19th century, we have a massive incarnation of very bright spirits, missionaries whose mission were to develop science. Very important concepts of science that would help us to understand Spiritism. So one of them was Isaac Newton. So then he was the first that was able to create a model that would tell us how the planets move. There were several others before him, but he kind of closed the book. He created a law. So use this law here and you're going to be able to predict. And it worked perfectly for all planets except one, Mercury. Mercury was always wrong. Nobody could understand why, but it was always wrong. Then Einstein came and he fixed general relativity. So my point is, we had a law, and the law is still valid. That physical law of gravity, is still valid. What we do is we change it a little bit so that we can increase the range of that law. So the range changes. So before that, you could only apply on this range here. Now we can calculate a broader range. That's what we do. That's why it's so hard when we go study whatever science. And you have to study so many laws because it's broken pieces. We still don't have the divine law yet. So we have a piece that fits here, but then if you look here, then you have another piece, then you look here, you have another piece, and you have several laws, and you have to have all that math. It's just because we haven't reached yet the plateau of the divine law. Another important one is the heliocentric model. The first guy, Copernicus, the first guy that put sun in the middle instead of putting the earth in the middle of everything. And then we say, why is that important? You guys can imagine how our mind and our religiosity, our religion changes if suddenly you see that what you see around you is not the center of the universe. It's just another planet. There are several others. First thing was to put the sun in the middle. Then we start seeing that we are just one planetary system. There are several others. And we saw that they compose galaxies, and there are billions of galaxies in an infinite universe. The minimum that is going to do to you is to make you feel humble. That's the least. But that's going to open up our minds to different questions and different philosophical thoughts that help us to improve our spirituality and help us to study, to understand Spiritism. But then, in this chapter, chapter 1 of part 3 of the Spirit's book, the Spirit of Truth start laying out the divine law. This such divine law that I've been talking about, and we are looking for it. And it says the first thing that is very different than what we experience as human beings. The divine law is eternal and immutable. It doesn't change. We experience as a civilization laws to change. Laws of physics, they change its range, and laws of society, they change completely. Law of God does not change. It's always the same. We change because we're trying to reach it. We're getting closer and closer and closer. That's why we change. When we understand it completely, if we imagine, this is almost unimaginable, but if we have a very evolved planet, if we reach that point, maybe we cannot even think about planets. We are going to be living in the universe. We are not going to be confined into a rock. So if we reach that point where our civilization will behave directly according to the pure divine laws, everything is going to be easy. We're not going to have a difference between humane sciences and physical sciences. Everything is going to be the same thing. And it's not going to be so hard to understand math and those very philosophical and hard books. It is very hard to understand. You have to read it over and over and over again. It's going to be very simple, and it's not going to change anymore. Then we're going to reach a point where our society is not going to have any more changes. So that's almost like almost impossible to think about it. It's something so ideal, so out there, and it's hard to imagine. But that's where we are converging. Someday we're going to reach that point. Another thing is, it's eternal. This is always a word that I think a lot about it. It's eternal. We don't even know what that means. It's eternal. It's in the infinite. We have this concept of time that is very primitive, and we have no idea what eternal means. So those laws will going to be with us forever. So it's a very deep teaching. Those laws are immutable. They are not going to change, and they're going to be with us forever, because we are eternal too. So they have to be eternal too. And the spirits tell us that those two aspects that I was talking about, the moral aspect and the scientific aspect, is the two main aspects of the divine law. If you are studying, if you talk about love and charity and forgiveness, this is the law of God. If you talk about trigonometry or physics, that's also the law of God. It's all the same thing. It has to converge to the same point. Every scientific discovery is meant for us to grow spiritually. Unfortunately, some of our brothers and sisters who study those divine laws, they go in the opposite direction. They start thinking, I don't see any God here in my calculation, so why should I accept its existence? I don't use it here. He's incapable to see the beauty of what he's discovering, what he's studying, and how perfect that is. But that's a few. There are others who do understand. There is a famous story, as an anecdote of Richard Feynman. I mention him a lot because he was a very interesting character. So he had a friend, and his friend was studying art, and he was a physicist, Nobel Prize winner. And he made a deal with his friend. You teach me art, and I'll teach you physics. Because they had a discussion, they were saying, yeah, I paint, do you see this flower here in the field? I paint this flower and I show its beauty. You go there and you say that everything is formed by atoms, and then you do quantum mechanics and everything becomes ugly. And he said, no, I see beauty. The fact that I can use those laws to describe how beautiful this flower is shows me, it imprints in me. It allows me to see its beauty. I don't need to paint into a frame in order to see its beauty. I see in another way. I see with physics. You see with your art. So in the end, Feynman did learn art and he started painting people. But the other guy did not learn physics. But in any way, my point is that this beauty can be seen. It's not all scientists that they are blind and they think that everything is material. Actually, statistics saying that most of them have a religion. They are religious people. Alright, but does it mean then, so I'm talking about the divine law and the importance of science to understand the divine law. So then do we all need to be scientists? Do we all need to go back to school and start learning math and physics in order to understand the divine law? Of course not. Of course not. That's not the point. It's not. We need all professions. Every single one of them. If we all go study something, what will happen with the rest? So we need people that produce the food that we eat. We need people that build houses. So I can calculate all day long, but I need a roof under my head, over my head. We need people to keep our city clean. We need lawyers to understand the law of society. It's so complicated that we need a person that does only that in order for us to defend ourselves. So how should I use this science? Well, there's one as an example, I'll cite one very important question from the Spiritist book. The question 540. Question 540 of the Spiritist book. It is said, and I quote, "Everything in nature is linked from the primitive atom to the archangel, who also began as only an atom." So this sentence is very condensed, and there's a lot of things to take it from it. We start as an atom, as nothing, and we can get to archangel. So this talks about the evolution of the intelligent principle. My point is, how can we understand this teaching if we don't know what an atom is? And what should we do? Today is very easy. If you take your cell phone, in a few minutes you'll see what an atom is. So that's what I mean. In the Spiritist doctrine, we have to study ourselves, and we have to study those concepts that allow us to unlock these very important concepts. If we don't understand what an atom is, we will never understand what it means from an atom to the archangel. So this little bit we need to study. We all need to study. Then we can say, yeah, but some people have more, they work with this, so it's easier for them to understand. But it's not easy for all of us in all the aspects. So if we have a particular profession, I'll be able to understand with particular easiness this portion, but there's another portion that has nothing to do with my work that will make me have to study too. There's another example from the book. I don't believe this book has been released yet in English. Evolution in Two Worlds. It's a very important and dense book. And in chapter 7, it talks about spiritual histogenesis and histolysis. What is that? When I read the first time, I couldn't understand anything because I had no idea what this meant. And after looking at the internet, seeing some YouTube videos, I understood what histogenesis and histolysis means in 1 hour. So then, the teaching that came from that is when we discarnate. The discarnation process, it's a process where our body, it starts to disintegrate. Our body starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and we see the person changes, it kind of shrinks. But our perispirit is being reborn. The perispirit takes everything that is good from the body, and it's like a purification process. The only problem is that we don't see the other side. We see the person. Person is sick, and then we see, but I knew that person a few years ago, and she or he was very strong and full of life. Now the person is very small in a bed, and we feel sorry for the person because we don't see the other side. We don't see how beautiful that person is, how the perispirit is the light that is coming from that process, because we cannot see the whole process. It's like the cocoon and the butterfly. We try to open the cocoon to take the larvae out, and then there's a Brazilian story that a girl went there and took the larva out, and the larva died because it wasn't ready to be a butterfly. So it's the same thing. It's actually the example that André Luiz uses in this book. So it's saying that we don't see the butterfly. We don't see the butterfly that is appearing on the other side. We only see the cocoon, the dry cocoon there that we buried. And this is part of the divine law. But how do I unlock this? How do I unlock this knowledge? We have to work a little bit. We all have to work a little bit to read the book and think about it. If there are words that you don't know, there are concepts you don't know, search on the internet. We all have to do that. Another important thing is that by trying to understand the divine law, by filling ourselves with this fuel, this knowledge, help us to understand where are the false prophets. You guys remember the chapter in the Gospel according to Spiritism about the false prophets? We have to judge the tree by its fruits. But how do you do this judging? How do you judge the fruits? I've been seeing more and more around people talking about quantum this, quantum that. It's very fancy. Quantum whatever. And then people, they fill big rooms with people listening to this guy talking about quantum this, quantum that. And then you think, oh, but that's all science. It is not. It's that person's opinion. It might be, there might be a lot of important things there, but it's the person's opinion. There's no experiment that proves what he's saying. And we need to understand those things. We need to understand, because it's our responsibility to decide what we're going to accept and what we're going to reject. That's why in the Gospel according to Spiritism, I forgot the chapter now, but there's a spirit who says, first commandment, you love yourselves. Love yourselves. Second commandment, educate yourselves. Educate. To be able to understand yourselves and the outside world. To decide what you're going to accept and what you're going to reject. That's our responsibility. So it's also said, I believe it's in the first or second chapter of the Gospel according to Spiritism, when Kardec talks about Christ. We had to develop intellectually for 2,000 years in order to be ready to understand the promised consoler, in order to be ready to understand Spiritism. Then we think, but why is that? Today we talk it's very common for us to talk about our thought waves, our aura, vibrations. We have to increase our vibration. We will never be able to understand all that without the discovery of electromagnetism in the 19th century. We wouldn't. How would we talk about those things? Or we talk about galaxies. Now we understand the details of Jesus' teachings. This is not me saying, this is there in the gospel. We had to develop during these 2,000 years in order to be able to understand the details of what Christ said. That's why he used so many, what is the term? Parabolas. Parables, yeah. So that's why his teachings were hidden in stories, because we can remember these stories. Maybe we couldn't understand completely what he was teaching us at that time, but we can remember these stories. It's like a memorization trick. We can remember that. And now we see the stories again, and then we can see the hidden meanings, because we had this 2,000 years. But then there is an imbalance. We needed to develop intellectually in order to understand the promised consoler. But now that we do understand, we have a complete imbalance between the moral side and the intellectual side. As we develop a lot in the intellectual side to see that we were very low. Now we need to bring the moral side to the same level. In our society, we see this imbalance very often. And the other day, I was looking at YouTube, and Nike, the company Nike from shoes, they released Nike Mags. The name of the shoes is Mags. And it's very interesting, because if you were born in the 80s, it's something that you always wanted. If you guys remember Back to the Future 2, remember Marty McFly's shoes? Everybody wanted that. So cool. Well, they released that. Now you can buy those shoes now. They have this, there's a motor inside, and it tightens the stripes in the same way that you see in the movie. It's exactly the same model. They copied the movie. So that's awesome. But at the same time, we have kids in Madagascar today, Mozambique, who never use shoes. They don't have shoes. They don't have anything. Yeah, so they walk bare feet. Some of them all their lives. They don't have anything to put on. So this shows us this imbalance that we have in our society today. There are fundraisings for not fundraising, but they open donations for a particular sports team or a particular grant for a university, and that people donate millions. And those kids there, they receive just crumbles, they receive just change. People, we don't look there. We look at Harvard and Yale and donate. I can't, but people do donate 2 million sometimes, 3 million sometimes. But they already have a lot. Why don't we look to the other side? That shows exactly this imbalance. But this is not unplanned. We needed to go through that. Now we do understand. Now we do understand. Now we see the divine law. At least we see it much better. So it's our responsibility to close this gap now. To use all this science that we know, all this intellectual capacity that we all know here, we all have here, we all have, in order to improve ourselves, to change inside now, inside of us, to learn that there are no such a thing as selfishness. Well, there is, but what I mean is it's an illusion. You cannot think about yourself. We are all connected. There's a pool of electromagnetic waves that we all partake in it. And once you make an act, you do something, it creates ripples. And this affects everybody and is going to turn around and come back to you. We understand that now. So we cannot be selfish anymore. We understand that. Why are we still selfish? The unbalanced intellectual part of us understand that. But our moral part is still, it's kind of being dragged. It can't follow completely. It will. It will. Every day that you try, it's another step in the direction of closing this gap. Another thing is very important. That is there in the middle of the chapter. Every law is written somewhere. Every law. So, if I want to study electromagnetism, I will go there and I'll buy a book. It's there, it's written there. If I want to know the law of this province, I can buy it too. It's written there. Where is this divine law written? We all know. We all know. It's written in us. It's written in us. Not just the moral part, the physical part too. Everything is written in us, inside of us. So that's saying, you can ask, but I understand that the law of forgiveness is written in me. I feel it. But doesn't mean that I'll be able to create or discover the laws of physics that I still want to explain today. Yeah, we all have this potential. But then you can say, but I barely understand the basic concept. It doesn't have to be in one life. What I'm saying is that we have the potential. Every single law that we have today was developed by humans. It didn't fall from the sky with equations in a stone. We all developed it. Everything that we know today, the knowledge that we live in a galaxy, in a spiral galaxy, and there are a huge universe out there with billions of galaxies. This knowledge came from us. We developed it. It is written in us. But it needs work to come out. And every now and then, we need a missionary, a spirit that comes, or just inspiration. We need the spiritual world to help us unlock. It's like we have a puzzle box inside of us. It's all there. But we need to learn how to open that puzzle little by little. And we need to work on that. It's written in us. There's one example that I was thinking to prove that we have this law written in us. If we imagine a common situation, someone comes and tells us a lot of very bad things. It happens to all of us. Even if we come to Canada, those things don't happen in Canada. Yeah, they do a lot. What do we feel? Oh, a stranger comes, and sometimes there's a lot of problem with drugs and people with mental health issues. So it's not uncommon to people say bad things to you. How do you feel? And you feel, some people feel anger. I feel like saying the same things back. Other people say, I don't feel angry. I don't feel like saying anything, but I feel hurt. I feel hurt. That's normal. Now, let's imagine that we have very special goggles, and we put on some goggles, and then when that person comes, we see the real person. We see the person's face, and we see that the person is actually distorted with pain and crying. We see a person crying a lot. And then we check the aura, and we see there the memory of that person, or the short-term memory, and we see that that person has just lost a loved one. So like his husband, his wife, daughter, son, or parents just discarnated, and that person is suffering a lot. Would we feel as hurt? Would we feel the same thing? Doesn't it change inside of us? Don't we feel sorry for the person instead of being angry to the person? We feel sorry. We see we see what is actually triggering everything that the person is telling us. That person is sick, is going through a very tough and strong pain, and maybe we would do the same thing. We all have that. So this shows us that the law is already here. What covers this law, or this knowledge, is our pride. That's why we need to study, to be able to identify where our pride, our selfishness is, in order to destroy that layer so that the divine law can come out. So this to me is the proof that we have all this love inside of us. We all have. We just need to learn to let it come out. That's it. But we all have it, and it's going to be with us forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael, for a great lecture. Do you have any comments or any questions? Anything from the internet, Marco?
No comments yet.
No comments yet. And back here, comments, questions? I like what you brought to us in terms of educating yourselves, because that's, I think, is the key thing. And especially in the Spiritist group, unfortunately, I think that's the part that we most forget is the education, right? And we see that in the activities on any Spiritist house these days is a reality worldwide, where the days that you have passes or this or that, it's full, but the day that you have a study book or the education part, that's the day they have 5-10 people showing up, right? This week we're just having this discussion on, someone posted something from my Spiritist center in Florida, posted exactly this, and then you can see the comments of people from other Spiritist centers everywhere, like Brazil, States, here, and we all saying, you know what, that's unfortunately is the reality. That's the reality here at TSS, unfortunately, as well. So it's good to have you all here today for this study, because that's what we're doing here when we come for a lecture. We are studying, right? So very important to bring this education, because otherwise, like I said, we're never going to unlock the divine laws that are inside of us, right? That's the only way
Exactly.
for us to unlock.
Comment Rafael said, it's very important to us to understand ourselves first, because it's easy to us to judge our husband, wife, kids, but we don't look inside us. And exactly the Spirit is bringing to us to look inside ourselves, know yourself first, study that, and you be able to understand what's going on around you, right? And have this capability to understand around you.
Yes.
Things happening, because sometimes we see something and we just or judge or accept without understanding what's going on, right? So that's very important what Rafael said to us.
There was another dimension. There was an example that Haroldo Dutra brought in one of his lectures about the illuminating yourself. That's our mission here. We all have to illuminate ourselves. So he said, how many people needed to change, to be illuminated to change India? One, Gandhi. Only one guy. He illuminated himself, and he changed the country. And this happens over and over. Chico Xavier, one guy there from a very humble origin. He had his, 5th grade? But look at the impact that he had just by developing the love inside of him. That's all he did.
And the other comment this morning we had the meeting with the parents, and we are saying exactly like that. Has a lot of intellectual people and kids coming, but our mission is to help them with moral. If for that, we need to help ourselves first, inside out, right? And yesterday watching was happening a workshop in Florida, and one of the facilitators there was telling exactly like that. She said, imagine Einstein coming now. You don't know he's Einstein, right? He's a kid. And say, oh, needs to be somebody else very, you can see, okay, I'm seeing Einstein coming through here. I can see his spirit. So now we need to find somebody else very intellectual to teach him. Okay, no, he's coming with intellectual. We need somebody else to teach him the moral, the principal morals, right? So the same you said about Chico Xavier, there don't need to be a high degree, right? Needs to illuminate that spirit and plant the little seed. That's what we're telling today. So the morals, right? We have very unbalanced in that today. That's we need to approach. Right?
That's true. Because actually you only can illuminate yourself. You only can unlock these divine laws on yourself. And then that's what they did. They unlocked on themselves and then became a sample to the people around them to unlock. Because we cannot unlock divine laws inside anybody but ourselves. Yeah. But we can be example like Gandhi and Chico and so many others, Mother Teresa and so many others, to help the others to unlock their potentials as well, to unlock their divine laws inside of themselves. And they helped millions and millions of people to unlock that potential. So that's what we can do. Work on ourselves, educated ourselves, so we can be samples so other people can follow, right? That's the thing. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? No? So we're going to prepare for the passes. Just going to ask everybody who's at the back to kind of fill it up the line so it's easier for us, so there's less rows for us to go through. Just want to say goodbye to everybody on the internet that was with us and hoping to see you again next Sunday.